My name is Leah, and for the longest time, I believed I had everything a woman could ever want. A loyal husband. 2 healthy, beautiful kids. A cozy home with big windows that caught the morning sun just right. Weekends filled with laughter, scrambled eggs and mismatched pajamas. To the outside world, we looked like a portrait of contentment and, honestly, even to myself, we were. Daniel wasn't the grand gesture type. He didn't do surprise getaways or write me poetry, but he did small things that mattered. He folded the laundry on Thursdays. He always made me tea without asking. When our daughter had night terrors, he was the first to reach her room. And every time he left on a business trip, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "You're the only home I've ever needed." I used to repeat those words to myself when I missed him too much. I never imagined I'd one day question if he ever meant them at all. But let me take you back to when everything still made sense. It was a Tuesday morning. The kids were at school, and I was on the kitchen floor, scrubbing a stubborn stain on the tiles. The kind of domestic moment that doesn't make it into romantic movies, but somehow, it made me feel grounded, real, alive. Daniel called from the airport, his voice low and steady. "Boarding now. Be good while I'm gone, okay?" I teased him, "No promises. The neighbor's pool boy looks promising." He laughed. "You're ridiculous. I'll call when I land." And just like that, he was off to Chicago, or so he said. I didn't question it. Why would I? We'd been together for over 10 years. I trusted the way his eyes softened when he looked at our children. I trusted the way he always came back. That night, I made spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. The kids complained, as usual. We watched a movie. I sat in our bed afterward, texting Daniel a photo of his son hugging a pillow and pretending it was him. He sent back a heart emoji and a miss. "You all ready?" I smiled at the screen and whispered aloud, "I'm lucky." It wasn't perfect. No. There were late nights. Some distant silences. A few missed anniversaries. But that's marriage, right? Real love means accepting the flaws with the good. That's what I told myself. Because if I questioned the little things, those missed calls, the vague work trips, the strange way he sometimes flinched when I mentioned our future, then I might have seen the truth sooner, but I didn't. I loved him too much to even consider that he could be anyone other than the man I fell in love with, and that's how betrayal works. It doesn't arrive like a thief in the night. It grows in the spaces where trust once lived, quietly, patiently, until one day, it stands in your kitchen, smiling at your children, and calling itself daddy. But that's getting ahead of myself. For now, I'll just tell you this. My name is Leah, and this was the last week I lived in the illusion of being his only wife. Asterisk, asterisk, and yet, nothing about that week felt unusual. That's what haunts me the most. I still packed Daniel's favorite navy button-down in his suitcase, slipping in a silly note that said "Don't flirt with the flight attendants." I still reminded him not to forget his vitamins. I still kissed his cheek like it was mine to kiss forever, and when the door closed behind him that morning, I still stood in the hallway for a few seconds, breathing in the scent of his cologne. God, how ridiculous that sounds now. The kids were late. For school, of course. Liam couldn't find his left shoe, and Ava refused to wear anything that didn't sparkle. I was rushing, juggling backpacks, cereal bowls, and missing permission slips, completely unaware that the man I loved was already living a life without me in it. "Mommy, do you think Daddy will bring me something from Chicago?" Ava asked, as we pulled into the school drop-off line. "He always does, doesn't he?" I smiled, tapping her nose. Even then, I still believed in him. After drop-off, I returned to the quiet of our home, my sanctuary, my stage, my whole world. I folded towels, watered the plants, and responded to emails with one hand while stirring a pot of soup with the other. I even started a new family photo wall in the hallway, frames filled with frozen memories, all smiling and staged. I added a recent one from our beach trip, where Daniel had his arms around all 3 of us. His eyes looked happy. Or maybe I just wanted them to. I think we all do that. We paint over cracks with beautiful distractions. Dingdom, a message from Daniel. Landed, long meetings today. Love you. I stared at those words longer than I should have. Something about the way he didn't use a heart emoji this time made me pause. Small thing, right? But sometimes, love is a pattern, and when the rhythm breaks, even slightly, your heart feels it before your brain catches up. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through my photo gallery past the kids' messy art projects, family barbecues, anniversary dinners. I found a video of Daniel and the kids dancing in the living room last Christmas. He was singing off-key, twirling Ava while Liam clung to his leg. I pressed play again. And again. Because that version of him, the silly, loving father, that man was real. He had to be, didn't he? At some point, I fell asleep on the couch. The TV played soft reruns in the background. My phone buzzed beside me. It was a calendar reminder Daniel had sent weeks ago. Dinner with the Thompsons, Friday at 7 p.m. Except we'd already cancelled with the Thompsons 2 days ago. I stared at the screen, confused. Was it an old reminder? A mistake? But the name wasn't even from our circle of friends. That was the first crack, tiny, unthreatening. But no matter how well you paint the walls, a crack always finds its way back to the surface. And I was about to discover just how many cracks were hiding in the foundation of my so-called perfect life. Asterisk, asterisk, and the first one came through my phone. It was Thursday afternoon. I was cleaning out the junk drawer, you know, the one filled with expired coupons, spare batteries, and random rubber bands. I had just found a photo strip of Daniel and me from our 5th anniversary when my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost let it ring. But something, call it intuition, call it fate, made me answer. Hello. A small nervous voice came through. A child's voice. Is Daddy coming home for dinner? I froze. The photo strip slipped from my fingers and landed face down on the tile. I'm sorry, who is this? I asked carefully. The boy paused. I heard background noise, a TV, maybe, and someone speaking softly in the distance. Mom said not to call you. She said you'd be mad. Every nerve in my body stiffened. Sweetheart. What's your name? I whispered. I have to go. Click, the line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone as if it had turned into a weapon. The room felt smaller somehow. The walls leaned in. The air thickened. My first instinct was denial. It must be a prank. A wrong number. But deep down, something older than logic stirred in my chest. A knowing. I replayed the voice in my head, young, maybe 5 or 6. Not someone my children knew. Not one of their friends. And that phrase, Mom said not to call you. Not Mom said not to call Dad. But you. Me. I sat down slowly, my knees unsteady, my mind spinning. Who was this child? Why would they think Daniel was their father? And what mother would warn her child not to call me? I opened Daniel's calendar again, the one he syncs with mine. There it was, tomorrow night. Dinner, 7 p.m. Claire R. Not a client, not a coworker, a name I'd never seen before. But it was marked private. That's when I did something I'd never done before in our marriage. I opened his laptop. He always kept it password protected, but he'd recently changed it to something easier after forgetting the old one. I tried Ava Liam 2020. It worked. My hands shook as I opened his browser. Recent searches, map history, hotel reservations. A pattern started to emerge. Chicago wasn't always Chicago. Sometimes it was 2 towns over. Sometimes it was just downtown. And every second Thursday, dinner at a restaurant called Vinette. The same night, every time. I googled the restaurant. Family-friendly romantic ambience, 4.8 stars. I stared at the Yelp photos like they held the answers I was too afraid to voice. I didn't cry. Not yet. Somewhere inside, my body went numb to protect itself from what my heart already knew. That call wasn't a mistake. It was the truth tapping on the door. And now that I had heard it, I couldn't unhear it. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and told the kids we were going out for ice cream, anything to silence the sirens going off in my chest. As we drove past quiet streets and happy houses, I looked at families walking their dogs and laughing on porches. I wondered how many of them were living in someone else's lie, but I wasn't ready to scream yet. Not until I saw it with my own eyes. And so I made a decision. Tomorrow night, I'd go to Vinette, and I'd find out what Toru was waiting for my husband at that table. But I couldn't wait until tomorrow. Not when every breath I took tasted like suspicion. After I tucked the kids into bed that night, I crept into Daniel's office. It still smelled like him cedarwood cologne and printer ink. The space where he worked, where he laughed during Zoom meetings and whispered sweet nothings into his phone, suddenly felt foreign. I opened his desk drawer, not because I thought I'd find anything, but because I needed to do something. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. Chargers, a flash drive, a leather notebook I hadn't seen before. That notebook changed everything. It wasn't labeled, just a plain brown cover. I almost didn't open it, But when I did, I found a calendar handwritten. Coded, initials, dates, locations. Notes like, CR, pick up at 5Ls, soccer game, bring camera. A's, piano recital. Don't forget flowers. I froze. LA, not our Liam or Ava. Different. Names. Different lives. And then on the last page. Family trip. 3 nights, Fairview cabin. Bring gifts for kids. That trip happened last month. Daniel told me he was at a tech retreat. I had made him a care package with snacks and silly notes. I even sent him a video of Ava doing cartwheels. Now I realized why he never replied. My stomach turned. I wasn't suspicious anymore. I knew. I sat there in the dark, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator in the next room, and the creak of the floorboards as our house settled for the night. How long had I been sleeping next to a man who had another family? Who kissed another child goodnight while mine asked where he was? My voice cracked into the silence. Who are you, Daniel? I opened the flash drive next. It contained photos of them. A woman, brunette, delicate, her arm wrapped around Daniel's waist like she belonged there. 2 kids, maybe 5 and 7. Laughing. Playing in a backyard I'd never seen. In one photo, Daniel was holding a birthday cake. A banner behind him read, "Happy birthday, Daddy." Not the birthday we celebrated at home. Not our kitchen. Not our kids. My hands trembled. I slammed the laptop shut and held it to my chest like I could somehow crush the truth back inside. There's a moment when your heart breaks that feels almost clinical, like your body detaches just to keep you from shattering. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stood up, and I wrote a note. A simple, polite RSVP. Daniel, I'll see you at dinner tomorrow. Can't wait to meet your friends. L. I tucked it into his travel bag, right on top, because if he was going to play pretend, then so would I. One last act, before I burned the whole theater down. Asterisk. I spent the entire next day rehearsing my lines like a woman preparing for war, except this wasn't a movie, and I wasn't acting. Everything I had built, believed, and loved was hanging by a thread. I was about to slice open with my own hands. I wore the dress Daniel once said made me look like something out of a painting. Red, fitted, elegant enough to make a statement, but not loud enough to draw pity. I didn't want to look broken. I wanted to look unforgettable. By the time I arrived at V-Net, the sun was bleeding into the horizon, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I parked 2 blocks away, didn't want him to see me coming. I walked in slowly, letting the scent of garlic and soft piano music wash over me like I belonged there. Do you have a reservation? The hostess asked. I smiled. Actually, I'm meeting someone. He should already be here. His name is Daniel. She scanned the list, then nodded. Double quotes, yes. He's just been seated. Party of 3. 3. Not 2. And not 5. Like a full family. Just 3. The possibilities made my throat tighten. I followed her past clinking wine glasses and murmured conversation until she stopped at a candlelit table near the back. And there he was, Daniel, my husband. He was sitting across from a woman. The woman, brunette, graceful, every bit the echo of the photos I'd seen. She wore a soft smile like someone who'd been told this evening would be special. And next to her a boy, maybe 6. The same voice that had called me just a day ago. Daniel hadn't noticed me yet. He was laughing, relaxed, like he belonged there. Excuse me, I said, my voice steady, too steady. I believe this is my table. He turned, time slowed. His smile collapsed. His eyes darted between me and the woman. Leah, what are you doing here? He choked. I pulled out a chair, sat down, smiled. Well, I saw the calendar invite. You never cancel those. And I didn't want to miss dinner with the Thompsons. The woman stared at me, confused. Daniel, who is this? He opened his mouth but nothing came out. The boy looked between all 3 of us, instinctively clutching the woman's arm. Mommy, not Claire, not the woman, his wife. I felt the air shift, the tension, the collapse. The entire table vibrating with truths too big to stay hidden. Now you know, I said softly. For a man who prides himself on being organized, your double life is terribly sloppy. Daniel stood abruptly, knocking his water glass onto the tablecloth. Leah, please, let's talk. Somewhere private. I shook my head, keeping my smile like armor. No, Daniel. This is exactly where this conversation belongs. The woman Claire was, pale now, blinking, shaking her head slowly. You said you were divorced, she whispered. You said your kids lived overseas. My heart twisted. So many lies. So easily spoken. So carelessly believed. He's been married to me for 12 years, I said quietly. And last week, he told our daughter that she was the only girl he'd ever love. Claire looked like she might crumble. Daniel just stood there, silent. So, I continued, folding my napkin neatly. How exactly were you planning to juggle Thanksgiving this year? The silence that followed was deafening. Not angry. Just empty. Because this wasn't a confrontation, it was a burial. Of every lie, every stolen moment, every sweet nothing he ever whispered while building 2 homes on broken trust. I stood, looked him in the eye, and said the last words I'd ever speak to him as his wife. Don't come home, not tonight. Not ever. And then, without looking back, I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. Finally ready to reclaim my story. But claiming your story doesn't mean the pain disappears. It just means you stop pretending it doesn't exist. The night air hit me like a wave of reality. My legs moved on instinct, each step away from Vinette, feeling heavier than the last. I reached my car and gripped the steering wheel, letting my forehead rest against it. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because I knew the real storm hadn't even begun. Daniel didn't come home that night, or the next. The kids asked where he was, and I smiled through my teeth as I told them he was away on business. The lie tasted bitter, but I wasn't ready to shatter their world. Not until I figured out how to piece mine back together. I called in sick to work the next morning. I needed silence. Instead, I got a knock on the door. It was Daniel. No flowers, no suitcase. No apology that could fix what he'd done. Just his eyes bloodshot, nervous, like a man who had just realized he was no longer the director of the show. Leah, please. Let me explain. Explain. I cut him off. Explain what? Exactly. That you've been playing husband in 2 households. That I found out because your other child called me by mistake. He flinched. Good. I never wanted to hurt you, he said quietly. It got complicated. No, Daniel, I said, sharply. Affairs are complicated. Forgetting your anniversary is complicated. A whole secret family isn't complicated. It's a choice. He reached for me. I stepped back. You don't get to touch me. Not after this. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I don't want to lose you. You already did. He left, but the silence he left behind roared louder than anything he could have said. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling while the kids slept down the hall. I couldn't stop replaying the dinner in my head. Claire's face. The boy's voice. Daniel's lies. 12 years of marriage unraveling in a single evening. I thought of the vacations we'd taken, the birthdays we'd celebrated, all those business trips that were really family outings I wasn't invited to. How many times had I been his alibi while he tucked another child into bed? I realized something then. I had been living in his story. A story where I was the loyal wife, the safe home base. But I wasn't going to be a footnote anymore. I needed a plan, not revenge, but truth. Freedom. In custody. Because if Daniel had lied to me this easily, what else could he lie about? And my children, our children deserved better than a father who treated commitment like a costume change. So the next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The best family law attorney in the city. He had another wife, I told her, and another child. I have proof. I want everything documented. Before he tries to twist this around. She paused, and I heard a quiet breath on the other end. You're not the first woman I've heard this from, Leah, she said, but you sound like the first one who isn't going to let it destroy her. I won't, I replied. Because, this time, I'm not just protecting my heart. I'm protecting my kids. And I'm reclaiming every piece of my life that he tried to rewrite. The thing about liars is they don't stop lying once they're caught, they just get better at it. More careful, more desperate. Daniel didn't wait long. 2 days after I met with the lawyer, he started texting again. Apologies, explanations, half-truths camouflaged as confessions. I never meant for it to go this far. Claire and it was over before it started. Our kids need us to work this out. The gall. He was still trying to merge his chaos into my clarity. Still trying to guilt me into silence. But I wasn't the same woman who found that leather notebook. I was sharper now. Colder, clearer. I kept every message. Every voicemail. I wasn't just preparing for a custody battle, I was building a timeline. Because if Daniel wanted to twist the narrative, I'd make sure I had the entire story documented before he ever stepped foot in court. Then came the twist. I didn't expect. Claire reached out at first. I thought it was a prank. Her message was short, almost apologetic. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. I think we need to talk. Please, woman to woman." I hesitated. Every cell in my body screamed, "Don't engage." But the truth, I needed answers to. We met in a quiet park across town. Neutral territory. She wore sunglasses, but I could tell she hadn't slept. "You're Leah," she said softly. "I've seen pictures. From before I knew. And you're Claire, the woman who called my husband hers." She flinched, but she didn't get defensive. "He told me you were separated," she said. "He said the divorce was complicated, and I believed him. I swear, I didn't know about the kids. I studied her, this woman who lived a version of my life, but in parallel. She wasn't the villain, she was a mirror. Broken in different ways." "Do you still love him?" I asked. Her laugh was bitter. "I don't even know who he is." She told me things I hadn't known, weekends he claimed were business trips, when he was with her, lies he told her about me, how he kept 2 phones, how he once said, "I'm living between 2 worlds right now, just give me time." Time. He always wanted more of it. More lies, more control. But time had run out. After Claire left, I sat in the park alone, breathing in the quiet, processing, and then I made the final decision. I wasn't just going to file for custody. I was going to file for full custody. I was going to expose every manipulation, every omission, every night he spent building a secret life instead of showing up for hours. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about the truth. And truth, no matter how messy, always has the final word. Asterisk, asterisk, but I underestimated just how loud a liar could scream when the truth cornered him. 2 days before our court date, my lawyer called. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind every syllable. "Leah, we received Daniel's official filing. He's contesting everything. Custody, asset division, even the timeline of your marriage." "He what?" "He's claiming the 2 of you were emotionally separated for years," she continued. "He says the relationship was functionally over and that the marriage was kept together only for the sake of appearances." I nearly dropped the phone. This man who begged me not to leave just a week ago was now trying to rewrite our entire history like it was a failed business contract. "He's lying," I whispered. "I know," she replied. "But he's not just lying, he's preparing." She sent me the documents. I opened them with shaking hands. It felt like reading a biography of someone else's cold, strategic dismantling of everything we had built. He listed emotional distance, communication breakdown. He even claimed I spent too much time at work to nurture the marriage. The rage that bubbled in my chest didn't explode, it calcified. I had given him everything, my youth, my trust, my forgiveness. And now he wanted to paint me as some distant, unavailable woman while he played house in 2 cities. I stared at our wedding photos on the shelf, and then I took it down, gently, silently, as if mourning a person I once knew. When court day arrived, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I walked into that courtroom with my chin high, wearing the same bracelet Daniel gave me on our 10th anniversary. Not out of sentimentality. Out of strategy. Let the court see the kind of woman he threw away. Daniel sat across from me, clean-shaven, suit crisp, fake grief written all over his face. But I knew better. And apparently, so did someone else. Just before proceedings began, my lawyer leaned over. "Claire submitted an affidavit." My eyes widened. "She what?" She gave a statement. "Dates, photos, phone records. She's corroborating your timeline and confirming that he told her he was divorced." I looked across the room. Daniel's fingers twitched. His calm veneer cracked just for a second. That was all I needed. It was like watching a magician realize the audience had figured out the trick. The judge entered. We stood. This was it. The moment when his carefully constructed lies met the immovable force of truth. And the part that shook me most wasn't the legal battle. It was what came after. During the recess, as I walked out into the hallway to breathe, I found a message waiting on my phone. From an unknown number. It simply said, "You think you've won, but you don't know everything." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. Who sent this? Daniel? Claire? Someone else entirely? Suddenly, I wasn't sure what was waiting on the other side of this courtroom. But one thing was clear, the truth had started a war. And the final battle was still ahead. Asterisk, asterisk, that message haunted me. "You think you've won?" but you don't know everything. I stared at those words for hours that night, replaying every conversation, every moment, every lie Daniel had ever told me. I didn't sleep. I couldn't, because what if there was still something worse, something deeper, more corrosive, something buried so well I hadn't even thought to dig? The next morning, I asked my lawyer to trace the number. She couldn't. Burner phone. No trail. But that didn't stop me. I called Claire. I needed to know if she had sent it. Claire, I got a message. I said, an anonymous one, threatening. Do you know anything about it? Her voice was instantly defensive. What? No. Why would I, Leah? I've told you everything I know. And she had. At least, I thought she had. But someone was still holding on to something. And I had a sick feeling. It wasn't Daniel this time. I drove to his office. Yes, I know how that sounds, unhinged, desperate, but I wasn't there to confront him. I was there for answers. His assistant recognized me. She gave me a tight smile, the kind you give someone you pity. I'm sorry, Leah. He's not I'm not here to see him. I just need a copy of something. Our joint trust paperwork. From when we set up the kids' college fund. She hesitated, then nodded, and stepped away. What she handed me changed everything, because in that file, right there in black and white, was the name of the trust's emergency co-beneficiary, Melissa F. Evans. I froze. That wasn't my mother, or his. And I'd never heard that name before. I Googled it the second I got back in my car. No social media. But a few public records. A P.O. box in another state. A small house purchased in cash 5 years ago. And then, one file, a birth certificate. My breath caught. It listed Daniel as the father, but the mother, Melissa. Not Claire. A third woman. A third child. My fingers went numb. This wasn't a secret life. It was a secret pattern. A trail of deception so deep it had fingerprints across 3 lives, mine, Claire's, and this mystery woman's. And somehow, we all got the same version of him, the charming man, the attentive partner. The lies dressed in promises. Suddenly, the anonymous message made sense. There was more to uncover. And whoever sent it didn't want me digging. But it was too late for that. The dirt was already under my fingernails. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done being angry. I was dangerous. Because now I didn't just want justice. I wanted to dismantle the entire illusion Daniel had built, one false brick at a time. So I drove to him. No warning, no calm, collected message. I showed up at his condo with the file folder in my hands like it was a weapon. Because in a way, it was. He opened the door wearing that fake smile I once mistook for warmth. Leo, what? Are you? Who is Melissa Evans? I cut in. And why is her child listed under your name as a trust beneficiary? His expression faltered. Just for a second, but it was all I needed to know. He recognized the name. This isn't the place to talk about this, he muttered, glancing behind him. Oh, we're talking right here, right now. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. His jaw tightened. It was a long time ago, he began, before you and I were serious. I didn't even know she'd kept the baby. The house was bought 5 years ago. Daniel, I snapped. 5 years ago, we were planning our vow renewal. 5 years ago, you wrote me letters about forever. His face twisted, not into guilt, but into frustration. You don't understand. Things were complicated. You dare make this about me, I said, voice low but shaking. I've spent years blaming myself. Telling myself, maybe I was too focused on the kids. Too tired from work. Not fun enough. And all this time you were a professional liar with backup families. He sighed. Like I was being unreasonable, like I was the one making this harder than it had to be. Leah, he said softly, you don't need to destroy everything. We can still work something out. For the kids, for us. Us. I laughed, sharp and joyless. There is no us. There never was. I was your cover story. Your first draft. The good wife you kept around to convince the world you were decent. His eyes flashed for a second, and then, for the first time in years, Daniel spoke the truth. I didn't think you'd ever leave, he said quietly. You were safe, predictable. I thought you'd never dig. The wind knocked out of me, not because it hurt, but because I'd known. Deep down, I'd known for years that something was broken, and I stayed. Because I believed in the version of him I fell for, because I thought love was supposed to be hard, and loyalty meant staying even when you're drowning. You were right, I said softly. I wouldn't have left. Not until you made me. And now. I handed him the trust file. Now, I'm setting the fire myself. I walked away before he could respond. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was silent. Still, I was past the hurt, past the begging. This wasn't survival anymore, this was rebirth. But as I turned the corner, my phone buzzed. A new message. This one from a number I did recognize. Claire. Leah, you need to see this. I thought I knew everything. But Melissa just contacted me. She's saying there's one more child. I froze. One more. Another family. Another life tangled in Daniel's twisted web. My knees nearly gave out. But I caught myself because no matter how deep the betrayal went, I was already on fire. And I wasn't done burning. Asterisk. I met Claire that evening at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind of place where secrets could breathe without being overheard. She was already seated when I arrived, her face pale, hands clenched tightly, around a cup that had long gone cold. I slid into the seat across from her. Tell me, I said. All of it. Claire exhaled shakily, then unlocked her phone. Melissa messaged me this morning. Said she saw the court filing online, recognized Daniel's name. She thought I might know you. She handed me the phone. And there it was, a thread of messages that made my chest tighten. Melissa, you deserve to know. I wasn't the only one, Claire. He's been living 2, sometimes 3 lives at once. I thought I was the last, but I just found out I wasn't even close. Claire, what do you mean? Melissa, he has a daughter, a teenager, not mine, not yours. I found the adoption papers. I blinked. Adoption, I whispered. Claire nodded. Apparently, she was born during one of his business trips years ago. The mother gave her up. Daniel pulled strings. Quietly, secretly, she showed me the documents. Daniel had adopted a child privately, listing a trust in his mother's name as guardian. There were no public ties to him. No photos, just a small scholarship fund and a contact number for an older woman in rural Virginia. He's been hiding her, I asked, stunned. Raising her through someone else. Financially supporting her, but never publicly claiming her. Claire's voice was hollow. And all while we were building families of our own. The room felt suddenly too small, like the walls were closing in. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a man who manufactured Liv's custom-fit masks for every woman. Every version of himself. Claire looked at me, her voice trembling. What kind of person does this? I didn't have an answer, but I knew what had to come next. We find her, I said. The girl. She deserves to know the truth too. Claire hesitated. Do you really want to pull another child into this mess? She's already in it, I said firmly. She just doesn't know yet. 2 days later, we drove 6 hours. Together, 2 women bound by pain, betrayal, and the quiet, burning need to make this right. We arrived at a modest farmhouse. An older woman answered the door, kind eyes, cautious voice. I introduced myself. Then I asked the question that made her go pale. Is this the home of Savannah Evans? She looked from me to Claire. She's at school, but yes, my throat tightened. She's Daniel's daughter, isn't she? The woman hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, but he's never told her. She doesn't know who he really is. Claire and I exchanged a glance. This was the final face in the shattered mosaic of Daniel's secrets, and she had no idea her whole identity was built on a lie. I stepped back, tears stinging my eyes. We won't disrupt her life, I said softly. Not yet, but please, let her know, someday, that she has sisters. And that her mother wasn't the only one who fell for a dream that never existed. The woman nodded, and as we walked away, I felt something shift. Not anger. Not grief. Closure. The war was over, not because I had won, but because I had finally walked away from the battlefield. Asterisk, and as I did, I realized something. There's a special kind of strength in surrendering what was never yours to carry. For months, I had worn every betrayal, like armor. Every lie, every hidden child, every broken vie held them tight, believing that if I could just understand it all, I'd find peace. But peace doesn't come from understanding someone else's chaos. It comes when you stop letting it define you. Daniel never called after that final confrontation. Not when the divorce papers were filed. Not when I moved out of the city with the kids. Not even when the article went viral. A wife, a mistress, and a stranger. How one man built a house of lies. I didn't write it, but I didn't stop it either. The truth deserved to be seen, even if it came from someone else's pen. Claire and I stayed in touch. Oddly enough, pain had turned us into something like sisters. We sent birthday cards for the kids, shared silent updates with nothing but a thumbs up or a heart emoji, and Melissa, she stayed quiet. I think she'd had enough of Daniel for one lifetime. We all had. But there's one face I think about often, Savannah. That girl with no idea. She was the final puzzle piece in a story she didn't ask to be part of. I sometimes wonder if she's figured it out by now. If she's ever looked in the mirror and asked why her smile looks so much like his. And I hope one day, when she's ready, she finds me. Not for revenge, not for answers, but for truth. From one daughter of betrayal to another. As for me, I started over. A new town, a little house, with peeling paint and a garden I never thought I'd love. I went back to school. I started writing again, not about him, but about me. Because somewhere in the middle of surviving his betrayal, I forgot who I was without it. Without him, without the lies. Now I wake up with silence in my chest instead of fire. And sometimes, that silence feels like peace. Other times, it just feels like space room to grow into someone else. My name is still Leah, but I'm not the Leah who waited at the door for him to come home. I'm not the Leah who blamed herself for someone else's sins. I'm not the woman who thought being chosen meant being loved. I am the woman who burned her world to the ground and planted something new in the ashes. And that, I think, is the real story. Not the secrets, not the revenge, not the betrayal, but the moment I looked in the mirror and finally whispered, "I choose me," and meant it.